Pranhandara Groiso, and good afternoon and welcome to all of you to this event, the formal launch of the Morgan Advanced Studies Institute. We're delighted that so many of you are able to join us today as we begin this very exciting phase for the Institute, so thanks a lot for coming along. We're honoured to be joined by the First Minister of Wales, the Right Honourable Mark Drakeford MS, who will be metaphorically cutting the ribbon. It's a shame we can't all be together face to face, of course, but there'll be plenty of opportunities for that in the future. We'll also be joined by the Chief Scientific Advisor for Wales, Professor Peter Halligan. Diakon Varan, thank you very much to both of you for giving your time and for finding the opportunity to come and speak to us. We're looking forward to that very much. We'll also be hearing from the new director of MASI, Professor Matt Jones, who's going to be outlining his vision, his ambitions for the Institute, along with our Pro-Vice Chancellor for Research and Innovation, Professor Helen Griffiths. But before we begin, I'd just like to say a few words to place the importance of the Institute within a broader context. The Morgan Advanced Studies Institute is named, of course, after the late Rhodri Morgan, and will build on the legacy of the Morgan Academy, which was established in his honour in 2017. We're all well aware of Rhodri's considerable political legacy as the former First Minister of Wales, but he's also woven into the fabric of Swansea University, having served as our Chancellor from 2011 until his sad death in 2017. Rhodri's passion for Wales, its place in the world, continues to inspire us today. And we hope that the Institute which bears his name will continue that legacy to Swansea University and to Wales. The Institute will focus on transformative, interdisciplinary research. Matt will talk in more detail about this, I'm sure. It'll build a vibrant community which brings people together across disciplines and research areas. Here at Swansea University, we believe that only by working collectively can we begin to tackle the world's greatest challenges, climate change, inequalities, poverty, and many other things. MASI will embody the belief that by working together, we can make Wales and the rest of the world more sustainable, more just, and more hopeful. I'm delighted that you're able to join us for MASI's first step, and I hope that you'll be able to continue to join us at subsequent events on its journey into the future. Thank you again for being with us, and I hope that you enjoy today. I'm going to hand over first of all to Professor Peter Halligan, the Chief Scientific Advisor for Wales, who will tell us a little bit more about the innovation and research landscape here in Wales. Over to you, Peter.
Thanks very much, Paul. It gives me great pleasure to speak today at the launch of the Morgan Advanced Studies Institute and to congratulate Swansea University on establishing Wales' first such institute. As many of you will be already aware, Swansea is home to a number of innovative and dynamic research activities, many of which are genuinely world-class. And the new institute will complement and extend Swansea's international presence and reputation, particularly given the intention from MASI to facilitate even greater interdisciplinary and international collaboration. Institutes of Advanced Studies have grown and been successfully adapted by a number of universities in the UK and across the world. You can think of Princeton, Harvard's University Radcliffe Institute, Durham University, Warwick, Birmingham, and the University of Western Australia. In the UK, there's a consortium of Institutes of Advanced Studies comprising a range of different models, scales, and disciplinary focus. At the launch of the consortium some years ago, Ian Diamond, then chair of the RC UK, welcomed the exciting increase in the numbers of institutes in the UK, and in particular, their role to deliver the current cross-research council emphasis on interdisciplinarity in tackling big research challenges and commitment to fostering public understanding. Before providing a brief summary of Wales' own research performance, which will highlight the important role of international collaboration and how it plays in growing Wales and has played a role in playing Wales' research standing, I want to take a few moments to mention the critical role that science collaboration has and continues to play in responding to COVID, and also highlight the relevance of the person that the Institute is named after. So just to make a few words on COVID, despite the horrendous loss of life and families bereaved, the destruction of businesses and livelihood and harms to mental health, the COVID-19 pandemic has demonstrated the vital role that science plays in the world today, and in particular, the benefits that collaborative mobilization of medical science can deliver. Within a year, and against most expectations, scientists isolated the virus, monitored its spread, and came up with several effective vaccines and treatments. Science, like scientists, has been changed by COVID. New collaborations, funding routes, and systems for sharing data will share and shape research from now on. In Wales, the Technical Advisory Group, headed by Dr. Frank Atherton, the Chief Medical Officer, and Dr. Rob Orford, the Chief Scientific Advisor for Health, continue to play a pivotal role in engaging a wide range of medical and social scientists from across Welsh universities, including Swansea, in providing valued science advice to Welsh Government. Turning to Rhodri for a moment, as Wales' current Chief Scientific Advisor, it would be remiss of me not to make reference to the influential role that Rodri Morgan played in establishing this position back in 2010, and his contribution to what I'll describe as a renaissance in Welsh science over the past decade. Rodri's engagement with science goes back a long way. As a civil servant undertaking research and economic advice around the early 1970s, he was involved in the planning aspects of the new Cambridge Science Park. Having become First Minister, he soon announced he would become both Minister for Europe and Minister for Science. These were two policy areas he considered important for Wales, but which, because the policies were not devolved, his government had to lobby hard for Wales' interest in London. Rhodri oversaw the development of the first science policy for Wales in 2006. In the foreword to that policy, he wrote, "I am passionate about the importance of science in our lives and to our ambition for Wales. This is why I carry the role of Minister for Science as well as First Minister." From the mid-2000s, there was growing calls to have a Chief Scientific Advisor for Wales, and Rhodri reached out to Professor Chris Pollock, a distinguished plant scientist now Aberystwyth, to be his first Chief Scientific Advisor in 2007 and 2008, while scoping the potential and the extent for the future role of a Chief Scientific Advisor for Wales. Subsequently, Rhodri was instrumental in overseeing the process for the appointment of the first dedicated Chief Scientific Advisor for Wales, Professor John Harries, who in 2012 went on to establish the now internationally recognised Sir Cymru programme, designed to accelerate Wales' efforts to create a globally competitive science and technology base. So what I'd like to do now, if I can, is to share my screen to I'll tell you a little bit about some of the work that that legacy has produced. So the Sir Cymru programme, which was set up in 2012, has been going for the last 8 years under an investment of nearly 100 million. The first part of the investment, Sir Cymru 1, the Star Wales programme, between 2012 and 2018, was growing the research capacity in Wales, working in partnership with a whole variety of universities and funding bodies. This appointed 4 chairs, and these chairs were based at different universities and have brought in copious amounts of funding, but has also established the rigour and the scientific standing of Wales. Moving on, we also devised a series of national research networks. This was to bring together the indigenous strengths in Wales along 3 major world challenges: life sciences, low carbon energy and the environment, and advanced engineering and manufacturing. This brought in a whole series of postdoctoral researchers and students that were galvanized and harnessed together under these citadels of excellence. Sir Cymru 2 was the development that Julie Williams, my predecessor, pushed forward with. This involved several more chairs, but 130 new researchers to Wales, and a total funding from European funding of in the region of 65 million. These chairs, some of which are based at Swansea, were instrumental in, again, driving that sense of capacity building that was badly needed in Wales. We have a whole series of fellows and rising stars that are based across all the universities in Wales. And in fact, when one actually looks at the total number of researchers in the last 8 years that have come and gone, it's over 500 have come and gone in different positions. And these have been located across all parts of Wales. But interestingly, together they come from about 28 different countries, celebrating the vitalization and the interdisciplinary collaboration that the Sir Cymru programme is responsible for. In summary, at the moment, the Sir Cymru programme has funded 12 research chairs, 115 research fellowships, 340 PhD studentships, and 9 rising stars. And this has been a huge testament to Wales, and one that was actually recognised by the UK government when I came in 2018, they were very keen to see the template for this, to see if they could actually follow that, which they have in some of the UKRI developments. Subsequently, since the end of the first phase and the second phase is coming to an end in 2 years' time, we've actually been involved in adding further funding, looking at future generation accelerator awards and industrial fellowship, linking up the academic research with the economic and translational fields. In terms of COVID, the Sir Cymru response to that was very agile. In about 6 months, we managed to fund up to 40 projects with a total investment of 5.4 million to tackle different aspects of the pandemic. They included aspects of wastewater monitoring, public experiences, application of artificial intelligence to ultrasound for diagnosis, and a variety of other areas in terms of mathematical modeling and with regard to novel technologies. So the Sir Cymru program remains a very live and active program, but instrumental in bringing people together and bringing science together where it can be applied in quite an agile way. So I've described the actual funding arm of that Wales has been instrumentally involved in. Let's look at Wales research performance. When you actually compare it against other countries, you actually find that Welsh research is the most efficient. And if you look at this synopsis that came from a Scottish Science Advisory Council, you can see that number of publications per million expenditure for the UK nations, Wales is at the top of that. But more importantly, I think to some extent, is how we stand compared with lots of other countries, but also within the United Kingdom. And you can see here that over a 20-year period, that Wales, the red line that you can see, has moved up from below the other countries, say for Northern Ireland, to actually overtaking all the United Kingdom countries in 2018. And this is a stellar performance to some extent for a research base that's relatively small and has difficulty securing larger funding from the UK government. So from that point of view, this is one of the things that's really important to highlight, the quality with regard to the Welsh research base. Another example in choosing to use this is the examples with other countries. So using recent data that we have from Elsevier, you can see how Wales, when you actually prorata the actual data, how it compares in terms of field-weighted citation, which is a very strong qualification with regard to how Wales has been performing. If we move on from that, we have data that's coming out, hopefully in the next 2 or 3 months, which is a looking back over the last 10 years to actually see how Wales has been performing. And again, you can actually see that Wales contributes to the UK strong research base. If you look at this data here across the 6 OECD areas from agricultural science to social science, you actually see that in most of the areas that actually Wales is above the UK average. And that the UK average for Wales is at 11, I think it's 12 points higher than the UK. When we look at how we're performing in terms of citations and publications, again, we do very well. 50% of Wales research outputs were associated with international collaboration. That's one of the highest in the United Kingdom. And if you actually look at another area which is sometimes not commented on, academic corporate collaboration, you can actually see that Wales' citation impact here is the highest of all the UK nations. And that's another testament to the idea that the research in Wales is relevant for aspects that actually translate into the economy and the social sphere. So that research collaboration, which obviously is one of the central tenets of the MASI, and they'll be exploiting, is clearly something that MASI will be able to build on. Because if you look over the last 20 years, you can see that international publications with regard to Wales has been growing steadily, to the point that we now have over 50% of our publications are international. And the reason why that's very important, quite apart from galvanizing sort of links with other countries in terms of research funding and grand challenges, is the fact that in terms of our citations, those international publications galvanize the highest level of return. So in conclusion, over the last decade, Wales has managed to grow the quality and the international reach of its research base. As a key contributor to that, in terms of growing that, research collaboration has been key. It not only accounts for the growing number of Welsh articles, but also Wales's high field cited weight impact. The standing of Wales published research is underpinned by extensive collaborations, and I'm hoping that as MASI takes off and creates a new intellectual stimulating environment, it will actively encourage collaborations between all the universities in Wales in creating new international research networks, new impactful publications, and opportunities for greater research funding success. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Peter. That was a fascinating set of slides you've shown us there. It resonates very closely with what we know in Swansea, that the strength of the research base, but also importantly, the importance of in collaboration with industry and business and other stakeholders that we work so closely with. It's certainly a really important part of what we do here at Swansea and at many other universities, of course, across Wales. So that's been a fascinating introduction. Thank you very much indeed. I'm now very pleased to hand over to Professor Matt Jones, who was recently appointed Director of the Morgan Advanced Studies Institute. Matt's going to share with us his vision as we embark on this new phase. So over to you, Matt.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor, and thanks to all of you joining us here today to found a movement, a community, a people that will have an urgent purpose. And that purpose will be to address the most pressing challenges, most pressing opportunities facing all of us today. To set us on our path and to give us a sense of direction, I'd like to invoke three saints. And as we're so close, of course, to the 1st of March, I'm going to start by thinking about the words of Dewi Sant, Saint David, our patron saint here in Wales. So back in 589 AD, in his last sermon, Dewi Sant is reputed to have said, "Do the little things." Not very inspiring, you might be thinking, for a new institute that is here to change the world. But these words are profoundly appropriate for our mission and our vision. What Dewi Sant meant was that in our words and in our actions, we should be focused on each other with kindness and compassion. And of course, over the last 11 months or so, we've seen so many wonderful examples of that. And by doing the little things, huge change can happen. And I think we can all bear witness again that through this pandemic, we can see those things emerging. So MASI launches today with a theme and a focus of the preciousness of life. I don't know about you, but in a global pandemic, so easy to feel small and insignificant. MASI is going to cherish and nurture the distinct, unique smallness of everyone and celebrate it. We're going to work in radically new ways, bringing together different disciplines of research and outlook to create innovations and to find things that will lead to us leading a fuller life together with better health, better well-being, in a world that's more sustainable, in a world that is more just, in a world that's more connected, and a world that is more, as the Vice Chancellor said at the start, hopefully joyful. So that's my first saint. Saint number 2 is, of course, Rhodri Morgan. And I'd first like to say thank you very much indeed to Julie and family for allowing us to continue to use the Morgan name. It means so very much to us all, so thank you. And when Rodri Morgan launched the Wales for Africa programme back in 2006, I think, he spoke of the Welsh people's long care and connection with sub-Saharan Africa. And I was interested, Peter, in your presentation, there were areas of the world that there weren't collaborations. And some of those areas included the global south. So MASI, as we launch, will connect across those regions, the global south, sub-Saharan Africa and beyond. And I'll tell you why. It's because the perspectives there, the communities there, the experiences, very different to many of our own, are vitally needed if we're going to innovate in a diverse and an inclusive way so that the world we live in the future is fit for all. Now, if we were doing this in a pre-pandemic era, perhaps some of us can remember that, we would, as Paul alluded, be standing near where I am now in the beautiful Swansea Bay region, and we'd be waiting for the First Minister to cut a ribbon or to pull a cloth off a plaque. But you know, it's possible that this medium is a better symbol for what we aim and aspire to in MASI. Yes, we will have a physical base in Swansea. But as Peter said, you know, our charge is to reach out across the region, across Wales, and then, as I've said, across the world to connect with anyone who wants to shape and share what I think is a vital mission for us all. So we've had two saints. My third saint, and please indulge me, is a personal choice. And it's my father, Glyn Jones. So he's now in his mid-80s, but he's still a practicing, active artist. And if you want to see one of his paintings, when you're able to, please come down to Swansea University and you'll see it in Fulton House. It's wonderful. But remember, I'm biased, I'm his son. My father, over his long career, has used the ancient and profound imagery, the Celtic imagery of our nation. And he's used it to drive radically modern art. And he's used the materials of Wales, the tar, the coal, the textiles, weaving them together in ways that on their own they could never create. So inspired by that, MASI will be grounded in the long and deep heritage and history and depth of our culture in Wales. We are an old country, and we are, I'm sure all of us who are here in Wales and Welsh and around the world are proud of that. And we'll be inspired by those values to work with whoever wants to create a thoroughly modern country, a nation that innovates successfully and collaboratively. And of course, as we've said, we will draw on as many materials as we can to weave them together to form new forms of collaboration. So, three saints. And I think at a time like this, we need as much light as possible. Over the last year, there's been such a great deal of loss, such a great deal of despair, and such a great deal of darkness. MASI will honor that by being focused and putting all our energies into working with you all to provide hope, to provide renewal, and to provide refreshment. By doing the little things, by being focused on the preciousness of life, by reaching out across the world to be challenged and disrupted by diverse perspectives, And we will do it in a way that draws on our values and our culture, so that together we can create and journey into a world which no doubt will be much better as we come through this time. Now, if any of that has resonated with any of you listening, and I'm really sorry I can't see you, but I'm so appreciative of your presence, then can I invite you to join us, not just today, but in the weeks and months and years ahead. We need you. We need you in our community, and we will value you. And I guess that is the vision and the mission of MASI. Thank you, Vice Chancellor.
Thank you very, very much indeed, Matt, and a very passionate introduction for us there. We're really looking forward to how MASI is going to develop under your fantastic leadership. And let's see how over the, as you say, the next coming months and years, we can engage with as many people as we can, both in Swansea University and further afield, to really put in place a fantastic set of research and innovation projects. I'm now very honoured, of course, to introduce you to the First Minister of Wales, the Right Honourable Mark Drakeford, MS, who's very kindly agreed to come and speak to us and formally open the Morgan Advanced Studies Institute. And Helen Griffiths, our new Pro-Vice Chancellor of Research, will say a few words of response after he's spoken. So over to you, Mark. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Wel, is-genhedlwr, diolch yn fawr, diolch am y wahoddiad, diolch am y cyfle I fod â chi gyd prynhawn yma ar y clasur mor pwysig. Vice Chancellor, thank you very much for the chance to be with you all on this very important occasion. As others have already, I'm going to begin what I have to say by reflecting on two things. I want to reflect a little on the experience of the extraordinary year we have all just lived through. But I want to reflect on it, particularly thinking of the legacy and the work of my friend and colleague and co-worker, Rodri Morgan. Because I can tell you, seldom does a day go by over the last year without me thinking about what Rodri would have had to say to us, would have advised us about, would have thought about the predicaments that we have had to work our way through. And I really do believe that the way in which we have been able to discharge the responsibilities we have now in Wales would not have been possible without the things that he was able to achieve during that first decade, that formative first decade of devolution. I've heard Professor Rhys Morgan, Rodri's brother, say on a number of occasions that Rodri had said to him that the crowning moment of his career in devolution was the result of the 2010 referendum, the referendum that turned the Assembly into a primary law-making institution on a par with the other parliaments in the United Kingdom. That the decisive result in that referendum, so different to the founding referendum of the Assembly, had demonstrated to him that the work that he had done to establish the institution, to give it a place in the lives and minds of people in Wales, that is where it had culminated. And quite certainly, we would not have been able to have made the decisions that we have needed to make, to have deployed the extraordinary powers that we've had to deploy, if it were not for the fact that the Senedd is now the sort of body it is, with the responsibilities that it discharges and the powers that it has to keep Wales safe and to make the differences that we have tried to make in the face of this awful disease. And I think the other way in which his legacy has been absolutely at the forefront of the last 12 months has been in the fact that this institution, this terribly new institution, 20 years old, that it has nonetheless been able to withstand the pressures, the enormous pressures that coronavirus has placed upon us. And I always believed myself that it was one of the hidden stories of Rhodri, was the deep seriousness with which he approached the business of building the institutions of devolution in Wales. You know, his public persona, as you know, was also absolutely part of him. The fact that he was the person you wanted to sit next to in the pub because you knew that you'd be in for a good and entertaining evening. But he was profoundly serious about establishing the Assembly as an institution that would be able to discharge the responsibilities of making decisions on behalf of the people who live in Wales. And you know, my take on it is that the Senedd during the last 12 months, both on the executive and on the legislature side, has measured up to the challenges that we have faced, and we would not have been in that position. We certainly would not have been in that position if it had not been for all the work that Rhodri carried out in that first decade to establish the separation between the legislature on the one hand and the government on the other, and to have created around it the working practices of government that we have been able to rely on over the last 12 months. So, you know, all of that, the living legacy that Rhodri created has been very, very much to the fore in my mind in the extraordinary circumstances we faced. Now, the Institute is going to be, as we've heard, you know, a fundamentally interdisciplinary body, and that is also, you know, entirely fitting, given the person after whom it has been named. You know, here is somebody who practiced politics at the highest level, whose phrase-making ability in English lives on in the political lexicon, who used the Welsh language as the thing of beauty that it is, who spoke French and German, whose primary policy interest stemmed the economy on the one hand and the rights of children in contemporary Wales on the other, who in retirement pursued, as well as his responsibilities in Swansea, the interface between health and wealth in a contemporary economy, horticulture on a scale that was significantly more than domestic, and who learned to play the piano at the same time. And if that isn't, you know, the embodiment of interdisciplinarity, then I really defy anybody to find somebody else whose polymath approach to everything that it means to be alive and Welsh in the 21st century. I think you'd have to go a very long way indeed to find somebody for whom interdisciplinarity, the willingness to draw on such a wide range of knowledge and inspiration, that was, I think, you know, absolutely at the heart of the way that Rhodri lived his own political life. The other thing that I'm just keen to draw attention to this afternoon is, again, as you've heard very much from the Chief Scientific Advisor, Professor Halligan, the commitment to evidence in Wales as the basis for the decisions that we make. This is never to say that evidence makes decisions for us. It never does. Decisions are always a combination of the evidence that you have, the context that you work in, and the judgments that you make. But without the evidence, the other two pillars of that three-pillar stool are really, really you know, shaky and will never deliver you what you need to know, and on the basis of what you know, to try and shape what you do. So the fact that the Institute is going to be in that great tradition that Peter set out, and the richness of its very recent history, I think is another thing that really will underpin the value of the work that it will do. And it too draws on a significant history, doesn't it? Swansea University's own history, 100 years old, as of last year, a proud history of world-class education and research across such a variety of fields and of individuals. And I did want to take a moment, if I could, this afternoon, just also to mention another great figure and pioneer in that field, Howell Frances, whose death earlier this month has touched so many of us. So Howell, somebody whose own education took place at Swansea and went on to be a professor at the university. If you're brought up in the labour movement in Wales and you haven't read the Fed, then you really haven't began to enter the conversation. But also somebody who used all of that. He used that great evidence gathering exercise of being a historian to put it to work for those wider cultural as well as political objectives here in Wales. His work in the Miners' Library, his work in the celebrating and marking the legacy of Paul Robeson here in Wales as well as across the world. My very final conversation with him, he took place in the House of Commons just before we went into that very first lockdown in March of last year, and he was full of ambition, full of plans for how the Miners' Library could be further developed, how its resources could be made more widely available, about how the story that it tells could be celebrated anew in the life of contemporary Wales. And we will miss him hugely as well, because he was, like Rhodri, an embodiment of all the things that the Institute will now want to do as the university itself moves into its next century. And Matt, in his contribution, in his description of what the Institute will be there to do, I think touches such a range of nerves in the way that I and the Welsh Government want to create a future for us here in Wales, a future that is fit for everybody, as Matt said, a future that is fairer for all, and a future that is rooted, that is grounded in the way that Matt said. People in Wales are ambitious for the future of this tiny and beautiful spot that we are lucky to be able to occupy on the face of the globe. They're ambitious for their future, but they are not ambitious in a way that does not draw on the values that they believe to be important. They want a future, they want an ambition, but they want an ambition that resonates with the things that matter to them, and that sense of social solidarity that we have seen so evident in Wales over the last 12 months, that groundedness, that celebration of our history, heritage, or shared sense of what is important to us. The Institute will need to be and want to be shaped by that as well. St. David did indeed say, "Gwnewch y pethau bychan," do the small things. But he also said, be joyful and keep the faith. And both of those were reflected in what Matt said to us today as well. And if the Institute can combine those things together, that sense of doing the small things, but doing them in a way that is joyful, that does that in a way that keeps the faith, that says to the rest of the world that we are open to all those experiences, welcoming of people from elsewhere, but also distinctive and different, and have an identity of our own that we want in that very positive way to make us our contribution to shaping the fragile globe which we are lucky enough to have in our hands for this brief moment. So through collaboration, innovation, creativity and insight, the environment that the Institute will create will, I'm sure, enrich the already world-class research culture that we enjoy here in Wales by bringing those diverse and varied fields together. It is a great privilege even virtually, to mark this formal opening of the Institute with everything that it will bring to the future of the university as it stands on the threshold of its second century, but to bring to Wales and the world as well. I look forward very much indeed to witnessing its growth and its success in the years to come. Diolch yn fawr, thank you very much.
First Minister, thank you so much for your enriching comments and thoughtful, insightful review. It's been really amazing to hear from you personally about the experiences that you had and the relationship that you were able to have with Rodri Morgan. And he clearly is somebody who means so much to the university and to Wales. There's absolutely no doubt that his leadership in devolution has been so significant, as you have just described, for the response that we've been able to make as a nation as we have come through this COVID pandemic. And I think that another thing that really came through to me from your personal stories there was very much around his focus on people, and people in Wales as being the talent pool, the solutions, the people. This is where we can get the answers from. We have got so much opportunity, and that was a really inspiring story to hear from you. Thank you. And I think that the research and innovation community is itself in universities, as you all know, a really extraordinary team of people gathering together. And as a newcomer to Wales, I've found very much so that Swansea is more that than I've ever experienced elsewhere, a truly extraordinary group of people. And again, reflecting just briefly on Peter's comments and observations that the universities are punching above their weight, I think that's very clear from both the impact that you highlighted there and the internationalisation perspective. And I think that that shared opportunity and ambition so that we can have a really positive impact on the prosperity, the resilience, the health, the quality, the culture and language is absolutely paramount and right at the centre of what we hope to be able to do. So people, that's the thing that we keep coming back to, isn't it? It's all about people. And I certainly see that that's where the Morgan Academy is going to thrive. It will bring people together in this spirit of inclusivity and openness. And again, COVID enabled that openness in a way that we've never seen before. But actually, how quickly were we able to respond and able to make changes and, as you say, take evidence to really be able to found the decisions that we needed to make. I think also reflecting, we've spoken a bit about diversity, and it's an absolute core principle of what we are seeking to do to increase participation and diversity. And we recognise the importance of diversity for bringing that richness into the questions we're asking and into the solutions we're finding. So I think that MASI again brings us that opportunity to develop the diverse community of researchers. We keep referring to communities, and that's absolutely what this is going to be, I think. And providing an opportunity where we have coherence and collaboration at the core and the heart, running all the way across Wales. This might be an institute that's starting here in Swansea, but we see this as a collaborative piece, absolutely collaborative. And we want to be connected through this with the shared ambitions and values that we all have to improve lives for people in Wales. A second point, if I may, that you reflected on was the interdisciplinarity. And again, lovely to hear those polymath stories that I wasn't aware of, what a talented man he was. And I think that we recognise that if you do something in isolation, there's no guarantee that you'll find anything interesting really going on at all. And you might not really impact on very much at all, but it's bringing these things together that really makes the change. And I think that's very much our ethos here at Swansea too. So we recognise that great things happen when these ideas come together from different places and the different disciplines are brought together in a really collaborative and open way. And that's, again, absolutely what you've heard from Matt about his ambition for what we're going to do here in MASI. He's very passionate about this vision, and this inaugural theme, I think, will absolutely catalyse this interdisciplinary research that we're so keen to see, because it will offer us this opportunity to deliver societal benefit in a way that we haven't necessarily been able to develop quite as fast as before. But actually, that's the open science, that's the coming out of COVID thing, isn't it? All doing so much for us. So I think we're building with confidence on years of experience here at Swansea, and we believe that breaking the mould of interdisciplinary structures is absolutely the way forward, and it'll bring us rich teams, bring ideas together, and we'll be better placed to solve some of these really pressing problems that are pressing across the world, but to give a better future. So this inclusive and this diverse disciplinary contributions, I think, are essential for success, and absolutely what we're seeking to embrace here in MASI. Then just a final reflection on what you were saying, if I may, First Minister. You were talking very much around the collaboration and the partnerships, and you reflected again on the university just celebrating its 100th year, moving into its 2nd century now. And right since its foundation, the university has been developed by industry for industry, and we have always shared together that journey. It's been right at the heart of everything that we do and continues to be into the future. And MASI is absolutely all about this partnership and collaboration. And as we've heard, it's across Wales and the world. It's, I think the biggest problems that the world is facing will only be addressed through sharing the ingenuity and the innovations that we have from talented people coming together. And of course, successful investment, but that's for us to do, that's for us to bid for, that's for us to get these ideas and be successful on this national, international scale. And we're confident that's what we're going to do. It's perhaps timely that the UK government have announced the recent very innovative funding mechanism, and that is right up there at the heart of one of our ambitions for the ARIA. So we'll be building together some strong applications, we hope, over time to really address that. So I think MASI is going to enable us to have the space to catalyse and convene collaborations, and we want to see that we're aiming to enhance this high-risk research that will enable those really big discoveries that could transform people's lives. Not just here in Wales, absolutely here in Wales, but also for the wider world, because that's who we are. And so I think probably it's time for me now just to really say thank you to both yourself, First Minister, and to the Chief Scientific Advisor for your really inspiring comments, for giving up your time to join us here at Swansea University today, virtually. We will have our virtual doors open to you anytime, and I do hope that we will see you again in the spirit of hope before too long on the campus. Your support for us today is highly appreciated, and thank you very much indeed. I'll now hand back to the Vice-Chancellor.
Thank you very much indeed, Helen, and thanks for everyone's kind words and the points that people have made during this introductory launch of MASI. This is the beginning, of course, and it seems to come at a particularly appropriate time, as a number of people have mentioned the fact that we're just entering our 2nd century. Mark, you know that at our university, we're committed to working indeed with all the universities across Wales, because we see how important research and innovation is going to be to help bring us out of this rather dark period that we've all been experiencing. It's going to be vital that we help generate growth in the Welsh economy, that we help undo some of the inequality, help repair some of the difficult mental health and loneliness issues that now exist. And of course, universities are going to play a hugely important role in that. And at the heart of that is MASI for us, bringing together people from a range of different disciplines who will have interests in heritage, in culture, in science, in engineering, in medicine, and many other areas. It is a really exciting moment, and I'm so pleased you were here with us. So diolch yn fawr, and thank you very much for coming along. Thank you, Matt, thank you, Helen, and thank you, Peter, as well. This is just the beginning, and I hope in the next months and years you'll be coming back and be as excited as we are about what we're going to achieve. Thank you for everyone else who's come along, and do as Matt says, please keep in touch and come with your ideas, because Matt's going to be really excited by them all, I can tell. Thank you very much indeed. Bye-bye for now.